That photograph is of a wall discovered and probably cleaned up from the palace of the Persian Empire about 3,000 years ago. Well, no, about 2,500 years ago, in their second capital of Susa. And it plays a part in tonight's lesson basically because the background of our lesson is in that empire and in that city. In Esther chapter 4, verses 13 and 14, Mordecai told them to reply to Esther, "Do not imagine that you in the king's palace can escape any more than all the Jews. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise from the Jews from another place. And you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not attained royalty for such a time as this." We're going to get the context of that. If you haven't read Esther, we'll do a digest of Esther tonight as we go into this lesson. But it seems to me, and I think I've in the past certainly felt this way, that we look at the heroes of the Bible as special people. Special in the way that we are not. And so we never think of ourselves as capable of doing the things they did. It is my view that the heroes of the Bible are not special people. They're merely faithful Christians and faithful godly people for the Old Testament people that found themselves in special circumstances and they had to react to them. And that's what our lesson is going to be about tonight. And let's start with Esther. The book of Esther is dealing with a time when the Persian Empire had ruled the world. And we'll go back a little very quickly to get you up to speed on this. God, through all of his prophets for centuries, had told the Jews that if you do not quit being idolaters and hypocrites, I'm going to punish you. And they, over and over, figured, well, no, he's not. Well, finally, in the days of Jeremiah, God raised up Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, the Babylonian Empire, and they came down and they destroyed Jerusalem, the capital city, and they destroyed the temple that Solomon had built, that the people had assumed could never be destroyed, and that as long as that temple was there, of course, no matter what they did, they would be okay. And God showed them, no, you won't be. And he sent them into captivity. And Jeremiah told them that God had ordained that they were going to be in captivity for 70 years. And then God would raise up a deliverer for them. Well, he did that in the form of Cyrus the Great, the first great king of the Persian Empire. And Cyrus did just what God had said he would do. He freed all the captives. But try to imagine if you've been in a land for 70 years. First of all, many of you would not have been born when the Jews, I'm talking about if you were one of the Jews, would not have been born when they went into captivity. And so you're born in a land that now becomes your home because you didn't know anything about the homeland of the Jews. And in fact, only a small amount of the Jews that had been scattered went back home and rebuilt and started over. The rest of them made their homes wherever they had been scattered. And such is the case of Esther and her cousin Mordecai. Now it took place in the days of Ahasuerus, the Ahasuerus who reigned from India to Ethiopia over 127 provinces. In those days, as the king sat on his royal throne, which was at the citadel in Susa, and so this would be part of the wall of that citadel where he was. In the third year of his reign, he gave a banquet for all his princes and attendants, the army officers of Persia and Media, the nobles and the princes of his province being in his presence. And they said that they drank freely. And this went on for 180 days, this great party that they were having. And sometime during that time, that party that they were having, the king decided he wanted to show off his beautiful queen. Her name was Vashti. And so he summons the queen to come and so that he could show her beauty to the people. Well, the queen did something that was unprecedented. She said no. That had apparently never been done with one of the Persian kings, and the people were shocked. And so the king wanted to know, what can we do about this? Well, ultimately, Vashti was banished, and the king sought out a new queen. And so they had him looking through all of the young virgins in the kingdom, And this is where Esther comes in chapter 2, verse 5. Now there was at the citadel in Susa a Jew whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, the son of Kish, a Benjamite, who had been taken into exile from Jerusalem with the captives who had been exiled with Jeconiah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had exiled. He was bringing up Hadassah, which I guess would be her Jewish name. That is Esther, the writer tells us, which is apparently the name that she was called there. His uncle's daughter, which would make her his cousin. But apparently he is much older than her, because it says, for she had no father or mother. Now the young lady was beautiful of form and face, and when her father and her mother died, Mordecai took her as his own daughter. So he was raising his young cousin. Well, verse 17 tells us that the king loved Esther among all those women that they had searched out, more than all the women. And she found favor and kindness with him more than all the virgins, so that he set the royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. So now this young woman, who has no experience at anything except being a young woman, finds herself the queen of this great empire. Her qualifications: she found favor with the king. She was pretty. But now a situation is going to rise that is going to require this very ordinary young woman, and when I say ordinary, I mean like you and me. I don't mean that there's any put down to that, to have to exercise some great courage. The king had promoted a man whose name was Haman. And in these kingdoms like this, somebody that's promoted to be one of the top people in your kingdom, all of the rest of your people under him are expected to do homage to him. In a sense, like you would worship somebody. And of course it says in chapter 3 that that's exactly what all of the king's servants did. When he would come into the gate, they would bow down to him and pay homage to him. Everybody, that is, except Mordecai, who being a Jew was not going to bow down to any man and pay homage to him like he would to God. The Jews just didn't believe in doing that. Well, this incensed Haman, and he wanted to kill Mordecai. But he found out that Mordecai was a Jew, and he decided his revenge should be greater than one man. He would just see if he could get the king to give him permission to wipe out all of the Jews in the kingdom. And he went to the king, and of course the king didn't know who was a Jew and who wasn't. But he told the king, these are a terrible people, and they're not good for anything. And so the king, with his signet ring, gave him the permission to do it. The thing to remember about the kings of Persia, in fact, most of the kings of that time, is once they had made a law, they couldn't break it. Well, Mordecai finds out about this, and so he sends word to Esther. And he tells her about what this man is planning. And of course, Esther knows what he wants of her. And in verse 11 of chapter 4, here's Esther's reply. She sends to Mordecai and says, all the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces know that for any man or woman who comes into the king to the inner court who is not summoned, he has but one law, that he be put to death, unless the king holds out to him the golden scepter so that he may live. And I have not been summoned to come to the king for these 30 days. What's she telling him? This could cost me my life. And so she sends, and they related her words to Mordecai, and it is then that the words that we read at the beginning in their proper context, where Mordecai said, do not imagine that you in the king's palace can escape any more than all the Jews. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise from the Jews from another place, and you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not attained royalty for such a time as this? And when he tells her that, here's her reply. Go, assemble all the Jews who are found in Susa, and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my maidens will also fast in the same way, and thus I will go into the king, which is not according to the law. And if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went away and did just as Esther had commanded him. Now you've got to understand this situation. First of all, this is a young woman, and probably very young. She may still be in her late teens for all I know, but she's young. And she has been thrust into this place where she is now the queen of an empire.